It didn't collapse overnight. It was taken apart piece by piece. Trust, homes, dreams dismantled in slow motion while everyone was told the system was too strong to fail. The 2008 financial disaster wasn't a glitch or a freak event. It was decades in the making, a perfect storm of greed, denial, and fake wealth packaged as progress. When it finally came undone, it didn't just wreck Wall Street. It wrecked people, families, futures, and the fragile belief that the system was built to protect them. For most ordinary people, the crash came like a lightning strike on a clear day. One week, housing prices were rising and everyone felt richer. The next, the markets imploded, banks folded, jobs vanished, lifetimes of savings were erased in days, and when help finally arrived, it didn't come for the victims. It came for the architects. The same institutions that had set the fire were handed the water. Governments called it a rescue. For millions, it felt more like betrayal. They said it was too complicated to explain. Subprime lending, derivatives, liquidity traps, words designed to sound like science. But beneath the jargon was a much older story. A handful of people building fortunes while the rest carried the risk. After the tech bubble burst in the early 2000s, Wall Street needed a new addiction. They found it, not in Silicon Valley this time, but in the quiet suburbs of America. Real estate. The one thing everyone believed could never lose value. Owning a home wasn't just part of the American dream, it was the dream. Families were told that houses were wealth, that property was power. Banks saw an opportunity to turn that dream into a product. They began slicing, packaging, and selling home loans like candy bars. Each mortgage became a small piece of a bigger bundle, something called a mortgage-backed security. To investors, it sounded brilliant, safe, predictable. A stream of income backed by something as solid as a house. But Wall Street had a problem. There weren't enough qualified buyers to keep the machine fed, so they lowered the bar. Then they buried it. No proof of income? No problem. Bad credit. They called it subprime but sold it as an innovation. Loans were handed out like party favors, adjustable rates, hidden traps, all dressed up as opportunity. And as long as prices kept rising, everyone looked like a genius. Construction boomed in towns where no one actually lived. Investors bought 3, 4, 5 houses at a time, not to live in but to flip. It wasn't wealth being created. It was a mirage shimmering above a desert of debt. Meanwhile, the financial elite were making a killing, selling, insuring, and even betting against the very loans they claimed were safe. The American dream had quietly been converted into a financial weapon, aimed, unknowingly, at the very people chasing it. While most of America thought the housing boom was unstoppable, a different game was unfolding behind closed doors, one that wasn't about homes at all, but about bets. Wall Street had created a way to make money, even when everything burned. Enter the credit default swap, a polite term for gambling on disaster. Picture buying fire insurance on your neighbor's house, not because you want to help, but because you're hoping it catches fire. That is what investors were doing, wagering billions on the failure of the very mortgages being sold as safe. And the wild part? Many of the same banks pushing those so-called safe assets were quietly betting against them. They built the house, sold the insurance, and then struck the match. The referees, Moody's, S&P, Fitch, were supposed to sound the alarm. Instead, they were paid by the players themselves. Every risky mortgage bundle, every financial grenade, got rubber-stamped with a glowing AAA rating. That's like labeling a ticking bomb as child-safe. Confidence became contagious. Pension funds, city treasuries, and retirement accounts all piled in, trusting the system because it looked official. It was no just greed anymore. It was blind faith in a game rigged by those who wrote the rules. By 2006, America's financial tower gleamed like glass, impressive from afar, fragile up close. And the higher it climbed, the more catastrophic the fall would be. Because when you build wealth on illusion, the collapse isn't just financial, it's psychological. And if you don't know how that illusion was made, you'll never see the next one forming. That's why understanding this stuff matters. The more you see the patterns, the harder it is to get trapped by them again. The illusion couldn't last forever. By late 2006, cracks began to spread through the glossy surface of the American dream. Adjustable rate mortgages started to reset, monthly payments doubling or tripling overnight. Families who once believed they owned their homes suddenly realized the banks did. Foreclosures multiplied street by street. Entire neighborhoods turned into ghost rows of for sale signs. But the real panic didn't start there. It began in the towers of Wall Street, where numbers stopped adding up. Those safe mortgage bundles that everyone had bought were imploding in value. The financial engine that had seemed unstoppable just months earlier started choking on its own fumes. By the fall of 2008, the unthinkable happened. Lehman Brothers, a 158-year-old titan of finance, collapsed into bankruptcy. Bear Stearns was swallowed whole. AIG, one of the world's largest insurers, was drowning in debt. These weren't reckless startups, they were pillars of the global system, and they were falling like dominoes. Behind the scenes, panic spread faster than any virus. Banks stopped trusting each other, cash froze, markets plunged. Ordinary people watched retirement accounts vanish overnight, the savings of decades erased in a week. In a single year, over $19 trillion in household wealth disappeared. Not stolen, evaporated. And then came the solution. Governments around the world mobilized trillions, not to rebuild families or protect homes, but to rescue the very institutions that caused the disaster. The bailout wasn't about morality. It was about survival, of the system, not the citizen. Executives who'd steered the ship into the iceberg walked away with bonuses. Ordinary people got pink slips and foreclosure notices, and as the smoke cleared, one truth became impossible to ignore. When the system breaks, it doesn't collapse downward, it collapses onto you. When the dust finally settled, Wall Street was rebuilt, shinier, richer, and even more powerful. But Main Street? It never fully recovered. The bailouts had saved the banks, not the people. And as the years passed, something far more dangerous began to grow. A quiet cynicism, a loss of faith in the system itself. To fix the crash, central banks reached for their ultimate tool, printing money. They called it quantitative easing, a phrase designed to sound harmless. But behind it was a simple truth. Trillions of new dollars, conjured from nothing, poured into financial markets. The result? Stocks soared, real estate rebounded, corporate profits broke records. But wages? Flat. Savings? Worth less. Inequality? Worse than ever. The same policy that stabilized the system also supercharged the gap between the few who owned assets and the many who didn't. And as the world stumbled into the pandemic years later, the response was even bigger. More money printed in 2 years than in the decade before. For a moment, it felt like magic. Free checks, cheap credit, endless liquidity. Until inflation came roaring back, reminding everyone that even money obeys gravity. By 2021, prices were spiraling, debt was exploding, and interest rates were rising like floodwaters. The very medicine used to save the economy was now poisoning it. And through it all, the same cycle repeated. Risk, reward, bailout, repeat. So what do we learn from it? That complexity doesn't equal safety. It hides risk. That systems don't fail by accident. They fail by design, when incentives reward recklessness. And that history never stops teaching. Only people stop listening. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The next crash isn't a question of if, it's a question of when. And when it comes, those who understand the patterns, the incentives, the policies, the pressure points, won't just survive it. They'll be ready for it. Real wealth isn't the money you hold, it's the knowledge you build. And if this story opened your eyes, stay curious, because history doesn't just repeat, it warns, and the next chapter is already being written. If you're ready to see what's really shaping tomorrow's economy, subscribe, not just to the channel but to the truth history keeps trying to tell us.